In the early 1900s, a young engineer stayed overnight at a factory, working with metal parts until dawn. That man was Henry Ford. But his dream wasn't to make cars. His dream was to liberate people. But years later, when he became one of the world's richest industrialists, Ford realized something disturbing. People had cars, they had houses, they had salaries, but they weren't free. And this video tells the story of that dark truth Ford discovered. If you've ever wondered why he couldn't become rich, you need to watch this video to the end, because what you'll learn today could change the rest of your life. Ford's idea was simple. If ordinary people could own cars, they would gain freedom of movement. And freedom of movement meant freedom of life. When he created the Model T, he lowered the price so that even ordinary workers could afford it. It was revolutionary. For the first time in history, people who weren't wealthy owned their own vehicles. But Ford noticed something. People weren't becoming freer. They were becoming more dependent. And that's when the doubt began. Ford controlled production. He controlled factories. He had thousands of employees. But one day he realized even he didn't control the money. The money was controlled elsewhere. Banks gave loans. They created debt. They generated interest. And as people worked, they weren't becoming freer. They were becoming more dependent on the debt system. One day, when Ford wanted to expand his factory, he went to the bank. He examined the loan terms. The bank's offer was this: a $100,000 loan, 10 years, 20% interest. Ford did the math. At the end of 10 years, the total amount he would pay to the bank was $180,000. That is, he would be paying back almost double the money he borrowed. That's when he understood. Banks weren't creating money. Banks were creating debt. And this debt was a cycle that would go on forever. People were working, but most of the money they earned was going to interest. Home loans, car loans, credit cards, everything was built on debt. Ford's famous quote is, "If people understood the monetary system, there would be a revolution by morning." Think about it. Why did he say that? Because in the modern world, most people think they work for money. In reality, they work to keep the debt system afloat. To understand this, we need to look at another man, Napoleon Hill. In 1937, he wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. For 20 years, he interviewed the richest men of the time, such as Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison. And he discovered this: rich people think completely differently. The most important thing Hill found was this: poor people work for money. Rich people make money work for them. This seems like a simple sentence, but there is a huge truth in it. Hill once asked Carnegie, "What is wealth to you?" Carnegie replied, "Wealth is not money. Wealth is the ability to live even without money." Hill tried to understand this sentence for years. Then he realized Carnegie was talking about the system, not his wealth. Carnegie continued, "Most people want to be rich, but they don't want to make the sacrifices that come with it." So what are these sacrifices? Giving up the feeling of security. Because wealth and security are usually two paths that go in opposite directions. Hill never forgot a story Carnegie told him. When Carnegie was young, he worked as a laborer in a steel mill. He worked 16 hours a day, earning $2 a day. One day, his boss offered him a promotion. His new salary would be $3 a day, a fantastic increase. But Carnegie refused the offer. Why? Because at that time he was starting his own small side business. He was selling small parts to railroad companies. He might have earned $1 a day, but that money was his system, not his boss's. And Carnegie understood this. If he accepted that salary, He would spend the rest of his life working for someone else. 10 years later, Carnegie's side business was bigger than his boss's factory. 20 years later, Carnegie was the richest man in America, and his boss was still working in the same factory. The greatest control isn't economic, it's psychological. Ford observed this in his employees. In 1914, he made an incredible decision. He started paying his workers $5 a day. In the conditions of that time, this was an astronomical figure. Other factories were paying $2 or $3 a day. What was Ford's goal? To enable his workers to buy the cars they produced themselves. But something interesting happened. People didn't become freer. They just started spending more. Bigger houses, more debt, more needs. One day, while Ford was walking around his factory, he spoke to one of the workers. The man told him, "Mr. Ford, thanks to you, I now have a house. I have a car. My children go to school. Everything is wonderful." Ford was happy, but then he asked, "Are you happy?" The man hesitated. He was silent for a while. Then he said, "I am happy, but I have to work harder now, because I have more things to pay. I have a mortgage. I have a car loan. If I lose my job, I lose everything." It was then that Ford understood. The system bound people not by impoverishing them, but by providing comfort. This was a comfort trap, because comfort creates addiction, and addiction breeds obedience. People were now afraid of being fired, because they had so much to lose: cars, houses, status, social prestige. Ford said, "People don't want to be free. They want to be safe, and safety is more attractive than freedom." Now, let's look at someone else. John D. Rockefeller, the richest man the world has ever seen. He monopolized the oil industry with Standard Oil. But Rockefeller's wealth wasn't oil. It was the system. When Rockefeller was a young man, he worked as an accountant at a small oil refinery in Cleveland. He earned 50 cents a day. One day his boss told him, "John, you're a very hard-working man. I'm promoting you. You'll now earn 75 cents a day." Rockefeller thanked him. But he went home and did the math. 75 cents a day, $4.50 a week, $18 a month, $216 a year. Rockefeller realized that he would never get rich with that salary. Because wealth doesn't come from selling time, it comes from building a system. Rockefeller quit his job. He bought a small refinery. He took out a loan. But he wasn't just refining oil. He was building a distribution network. He was selling to wholesalers. He was signing deals with small shops. People would use oil every day, every week, forever. Rockefeller used to say you want to get rich by working a job is like saying you want to cross a river by building a bridge. You'll drown before you build the bridge. So how did Rockefeller get rich? By controlling what people needed. It wasn't oil, it was the distribution system. Rockefeller understood this. People would pay for energy. Every day, every week, forever. Passive income. And that's the real secret. At 30, Rockefeller was a millionaire. At 40, a 10-million-year-old. At 50, a 100-million-year-old. At 60, he was the richest man in the world. But the interesting thing is, after 40, Rockefeller hardly ever worked. He ran the system. He just managed it. There's a saying Rockefeller told his son, "Never work a job, own a system." This sentence seems simple, but it contains a tremendous truth. Why can't people get rich? According to Ford, the reason wasn't a lack of talent. The reason was three chains: dependence on security, fear of social expectations, and risk aversion. Most people don't want freedom. They fear uncertainty. That's why they choose a salaried system. A salary provides security, but it also sets limits. Napoleon Hill explained it this way. He would ask people who wanted to be rich, "Why do you want to be rich?" Most would answer, "To live a comfortable life, to be secure, to not worry." Hill realized that these people wanted security, not wealth. And security never brings wealth. Hill once spoke to a factory worker. The man said to him, "Mr. Hill, I want to start my own business, but my wife won't let me. She says she has a secure job. Why should we take risks? We have 2 children. We have a mortgage. What will we do if I fail?" Hill asked him, "Are you happy?" The man replied, "No, but I am secure." Hill told him, "A prisoner who is safe is no more unhappy than one who is free. He is just more dependent." Now, let's look at another man, J. Paul Getty, the richest oil tycoon of the 20th century. Getty entered the oil business in the 1930s during the Great Depression. While everyone else was on the verge of bankruptcy, he was buying oil wells. People called him crazy. "The oil is gone. The economy has collapsed. What are you doing?" they said. Getty replied, "I'm not buying oil. I'm buying the future. When the economy recovers, everyone will need oil. And I will be ready." 10 years later, Getty was a billionaire. 40 years later, he was the richest man in the world. Getty used to say, "If you can get up at 6 in the morning and work until 6 in the evening, and you want to be rich, you've chosen the wrong profession." This is a harsh truth, because the exchange of time for money never translates into wealth. Getty's business model was simple. Buy oil wells, rent them out to others, let them work. You make money. The system. Getty worked 2 hours a day, but his earnings were 100 times that of a doctor who worked 16 hours a day. What was the difference? The doctor was selling his time. Getty was running the system. In Ford's view, the biggest difference was this. Rich people don't work for money. Money works for them. But how do they do that? When Andrew Carnegie had Napoleon Hill study wealth for 20 years, he discovered a formula. Carnegie's golden rule. Wealth comes in 3 stages. First stage, learning to make money. Second stage, learning to save money. Third stage, learning to multiply money. Most people get stuck at the first stage. Carnegie told Hill a story. "When I started in the steel business, I worked 16 hours a day. I was making money, but I wasn't rich. Then one day I realized I can find people to do my job. That's when I started to get rich." What did Carnegie do? He systematized it. He automated his factories. He appointed managers. He focused on strategy. The result? By working 2 hours a day, he started earning 10 times more than before. One of Carnegie's most famous quotes is, "The only way to create wealth is to benefit from the labor of others." This is a harsh statement, but it's true. No one has ever become a billionaire by working alone. You can't get rich without building a system. Ford, however, explained it differently. Why is it so difficult to break free from the system? According to Ford, it requires 3 things: financial independence, meaning income sources are not dependent on salary; psychological courage, the ability to tolerate uncertainty; and the power to reject societal norms, the ability to question normal life. Most people lose on the third point, because societal approval is more attractive than freedom. So what does this mean? Let's explain with simple examples. A doctor earns $500 an hour. Great money. But if that doctor doesn't work, the money stops. A real estate agent owns a rental apartment. They have $10,000 in rental income per month. Even if that real estate agent is hospitalized, the money continues to come in. That's the difference. The first one sells time. The second one has built a system. Another example, a software developer earns $10,000 a month. Great. But if that software developer leaves their company, their income is zero. Another software developer has developed an application. The application is sold on the App Store. They earn $5,000 a month. But even if that software developer does nothing, the money continues to come in. That's the difference. Now let's look at another giant name, Cornelius Vanderbilt, one of the richest men of the 19th century. He built a railroad and shipping empire. Vanderbilt has a saying, "Making money is easy. Keeping money is hard. But making money work, that's the real art." What did Vanderbilt do? He bought a fleet of ships. But he didn't sail them himself. He hired captains. He bought a railroad line. But he didn't drive the trains himself. He hired engineers. The result? He was earning thousands of dollars a day without doing anything himself. When Vanderbilt died at the age of 80, his fortune was over $100 million. In today's money, that's $200 billion. And interestingly, Vanderbilt hardly worked at all after the age of 60. His system worked. Ford's wealth increased as he aged, but at one point he is said to have remarked, "Money is just a tool, but people make it an end in itself." True freedom is not the amount of money. True freedom is not having to sell your time. Because in the modern system, most people don't have money. They sell their lifetime in exchange for money. Another giant name, Henry J. Kaiser, a construction and shipbuilding magnate. He built ships for the U.S. government during World War II. Kaiser has a saying, "The problem isn't money. The problem isn't knowing the value of time." Kaiser used to say, "When I was young, I worked by the hour. Now I work by the minute. That's the difference." What did he mean? Rich people value their time. Poor people waste their time. One day, Kaiser was talking to a young engineer. The young man told him, "Mr. Kaiser, I work very hard, 70 hours a week, but I'm still not rich." Kaiser asked him, "And how many of those 70 hours are you working for your boss, not for yourself?" The man thought for a moment. Then he said, "All of it." Kaiser, "That's why you're not rich." Kaiser meant to say, if you sell your time to someone else, you can never be rich, because time is finite. But the system can work indefinitely. Ford's greatest fear wasn't poverty. It was dependence. Because in his view, modern man wasn't chained. He loved chains, chains of comfort. Ford once said, "People don't want to be free. They want to be safe. And safety is more appealing than freedom. People love their chains so much that they see those who try to free them as enemies." Napoleon Hill dedicated a chapter to this in his book, The Power of Fear. Hill said, "People's greatest fear isn't poverty, nor is it failure. The real fear is the unknown. Quitting a salaried job, starting your own business, taking risks. That's what most people can't do." Hill interviewed Thomas Edison. Edison told him, "I failed 10,000 times, but I never gave up, because failure was just trying another way." Hill asked, "Why do most people give up?" Edison replied, "Because they see failure as defeat. I see it as education. Every failure taught me something, and in the end, I succeeded." Edison was 50 years old when he invented the light bulb, after 10,000 experiments. But those 10,000 experiments hadn't been in vain, because each one had taught Edison what didn't work. Ford's thoughts can be summarized in a single question. What would your life be like if you didn't have to earn money tomorrow morning? Would you be where you work? Would you live in the same city? Would you socialize with the same people? Or would you be a completely different person? That's the real question of freedom, because freedom is measured not by what you have, but by what you can give up. Most people, when they answer this question honestly, realize that almost their entire lives revolve around the necessity of earning money. The city they live in is close to work. Their friends are from work. Hobbies are confined to weekends. Vacations are 2 weeks a year. But the lives of wealthy people are different. They decide where they live. They decide who they spend time with. They decide what they do. Ford, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Hill, Getty, Kaiser, Vanderbilt. They all said the same truth in different ways. The system is designed to make you work, not to liberate you. And you can't change the system, but you can free yourself from it. How does the system work? Simple. It gives you a salary. This salary is enough for you to live comfortably, but it's not enough to make you rich. Then it gives you a loan. A house, a car, a vacation, everything is on loan. And you become indebted. Now you can't quit your job because you have debts. There are payments. There are responsibilities. That's exactly what the system wants. For you to be dependent. Because dependent people are obedient. They don't take risks. They don't become anti-system. Ford saw this system. Carnegie saw this system. Rockefeller saw this system. And they all made the same decision. We will stay outside of this system. How? By creating their own system. Money would work for them, not them for money. If this video made you think, if you felt, I need to change something in my life, then that's exactly what this channel is for. Because true freedom begins in the mind. And everything I explained in this video is just the beginning. Because the system is complex, but understandable. And once you understand it, you no longer have to play by its rules. Because knowledge is power. But knowledge without application is just entertainment. And you're here not for entertainment, but to be free. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this content is the kind YouTube doesn't really like, but it's the kind you need to know about. This video was a warning for you, a moment of awareness. Now it's time to act. Remember, Ford, Carnegie, Rockefeller. They were once ordinary people like you. They worked for a salary. But one day, they decided. They said, this isn't my life. And they changed everything. You can do the same. But first, you need to change your mind. Because change doesn't start outside, it starts inside. Subscribe and reclaim your mind. See you in the next video. And remember, freedom is a choice. Now, the choice is yours.